Hey everybody, it's Strict9 with Strict9 GP, and I'm back with another episode in my Out of the Park 21 Observations and Tips series. It's kind of like my attempt at a tutorial type series, but it's not really straight up tutorial. It's pretty free form, and I'm kind of mean for it to be that way, so hopefully you'll get some benefit from it. But the goal really is just to show you how I play out some of the concepts in this game. And I've got a lot of experience now with this version, the latest version, but also the series of Out of the Park Baseball I've been playing since way early in development for this game. And I put at this point, close to 20 years, hard to believe, but into this game. And it's I think, one of the best sports management games on the market. I think it's, to me, the best baseball management game for PC that I've seen. And one of the things that I always like to mention when I can, and one of the things I think that makes Out of the Park 21 and, well, Out of the Park baseball in general so great is it does a good job of simulating, the way a baseball season is going to go from start to finish, top to bottom, all the way from the players on the field to the general manager and the things you have to do and take care of as a general manager, to managing your minors, to drafting, to dealing with the ownership. I think it does a great job of simulating all of that. But I think what really keeps me coming back, and what I think is so so addictive and enjoyable about the game, is there's a role-playing aspect to it. And, that's something I'm trying to also point out with this series. And just, I'm hoping that some of the tips that I give you, and again, this is not a straight-up tutorial, so don't feel like you have to follow everything I'm going to talk about to the letter. But I hope that some of these tips that I give you will help you enjoy that role-playing aspect. And just to kind of recap what I've talked about in the previous couple videos in the series, if you're using the Evolution League setting, for instance, and I think that's going to be under Rules or Options, your dynamically evolving league, some of these things happen, and they can really shake up the way you're running a team. And so if you've got some good strategies in place, you're able to weather these kind of things and build a winning team regardless of what kind of league changes get thrown at you. And that's one way that I like to play the game, because I like that challenge. I think it freshens things up. It keeps it interesting. One of the things I talked about in the first video in the series was a financial setting that evolved in my league, where players were automatically eligible for arbitration after their first season in the major leagues, where they played not even a full season, but a certain amount. And I think it's probably going to be under financials, but that's been a huge thing to overcome. And free agency changed from 6 years to 4. And so what it's made me have to do is I have to churn through a lot of these players. I can only pick and choose when it comes to the superstar players that I want to keep, guys that I've developed, primarily because it's really hard to compete free agency with these kind of settings too. But I like those kind of challenges when they come along. And so a lot of the purpose of me doing these videos is kind of giving you some strategies so that you can have changes to your league, have changes to your owner. Another thing I'm dealing with right now, the guy is really he's really stingy. The new owner, I think his father died and he took over. He's meddling, controlling, and so he's not giving me a big budget. Considering how successful we've been, it's really pitiful. But the budget on this team right now is 22nd in the league. We're a big market team should have a bigger budget, but owner personality plays into this game, and that's one of the things I love about it. Again, that's that role playing aspect that keeps me coming back. And so I'm going to go over drafting today, the way I handle the draft, and it's really going to have to take some of those things into account. The fact that I've got a meddling owner, things have changed financially in this league, but it's also going to be, I think, a strategy that you can stick with, and regardless of how your league is evolved or your owner's doing, you can have success with it. And it's going to piggyback off the second video that I did where I talked about my minor league farm system strategy, and I'll give a brief recap of that. But one of the things I look for in the minors is I stick to developing players pretty early. So I put a lot of focus on coaching and developing the players right here in the low levels of my minors. I feel like the biggest level of development I've ever seen in this playthrough has come from single A. So I make sure that when it comes to my personnel, I've got good managers, coaches at that level and below, really. But you can see here, Lakewood, my single A team, outstanding manager, great pitching and hitting coaches. And I stick to that pretty much down the line on these earlier or lower levels, because I want the guys I draft, I want them to have a great shot at developing. And so I want to put up most of my focus when it comes to hiring the best staff I can. I want to make sure that it's at these lower levels. So another thing is I'm also going to hire coaches who are rated better in the type, better to coach the type players I'm drafting. So for me, I like to draft contact hitters primarily when it comes to batters, and I like to draft power pitchers primarily when it comes to pitchers. So you'll see, as much as I can, it's really showing up with the hitters. I mean, all my hitting coaches here, for the most part, are focused on contact. That's what they're going to have the most impact when it comes to developing a hitter. And then I've had a pretty tough time, I guess, with the power pitchers, but that's generally what I'm looking for in a pitching coach. I'm also looking for coaches in these lower levels who are going to, let's look at, well, I'm looking for, here's, for the personality and style, I'm looking for managers and coaches who have a good influence on young players. So if they're focused on the things that I'm trying to develop in my players, and they've got a good influence on young players, that's going to help with development. So those are pretty much the keys to my minor league farm system. Now, when it comes to the draft, I just gave two of my biggest keys, was in what I'm looking for in the players. So for pitchers, I'm looking at power, which is really stuff. I want to draft pitchers who have a really high stuff potential. And then on the batter side, I want to draft batters who have a lot of contact potential. And I feel like those are the... You can play anyway. I'm going to have to stop myself, because I know you if you wanted to focus on power as in the batting side, you're absolutely free to do that. And hire staff in the minors to accommodate those guys for development. But for me, one of the things I've always noticed is that a lot of times power doesn't really compute to the other ratings. It's kind of like that Dave Kingman rule. If you're old enough to remember Dave Kingman, he was a great power hitter back in the day, in the 70s and 80s. Played with a lot of different teams. He hit a lot of home runs, but he also struck out a lot and hit generally for a low average. And so you're not going to get as much all-around play if you're focused on just a power hitter at the expense of the other two metrics. But I generally find that you can get a contact hitter who's also going to have good speed, maybe good defense, good gap power, those kind of things. It's going to lead to extra bases, and it's going to lead to runs just as easily, and really probably more so in the long run than a guy who's going to hit a lot of home runs. So that's the way. That's why I draft for contact. On the pitcher side for stuff, and this is going to show you the pitchers that are available. If they have the stuff, a lot of times the other ratings will develop along that same line. It's like if they have the stuff, if they're able to throw 95 and up, high 90s fastball, they don't usually lose that until they get really, if they've got any potential, true potential, and they make it to the majors. Stuff is one of the last things I find that they'll lose in this game. Control, movement, those things I find will go down quicker than stuff if you draft a guy who's got good power out of the gate. And so that's why I go with stuff on the pitcher side. If you wanted to look at movement, for instance, is going to be key to limiting home runs. If that's kind of staff you want to put together, maybe a ground ball type staff with some good defenders behind them, you may want to go for movement. Control, same way. If you're looking to limit maybe the amount of base runners you're going to give up, maybe you want to have a staff that's high end control. But for me, I just enjoy those high strikeout, high stuff type pitchers. So those are the two things that I'm drafting for anytime I'm drafting. And so I'm going to, taking that into mind, that's a little bit maybe more than I wanted to cover, I guess, before we get started into the draft. But that's the concepts that I'm working from. And so hopefully that'll give you a good picture of why I draft the way I draft. So for this draft, I've got a pretty good selection here. After really turning it around, going through a stage where we won 3 World Series in four seasons, I actually got the Dynasty Achievement after doing that, which is something I haven't gotten so far in Out of the Park 21. But our owner got stingy, like I was saying, and we've really lost a lot of the good players that we wanted to keep, or I wanted to keep, and had a tough season last year. I think just to show you the history real quick, we finished 69 and 93, first losing record we've had since 2049, so almost 10 seasons. That's going to be the reason we've got this high draft pick. But I'm hoping that's going to give me a pretty solid pick, somebody who's really got a fast track to the majors. So let's go ahead and auto draft until Philadelphia. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at how I value and analyze these players. Might go through a few picks to show you kind of what these concepts look like in action, and then move on. I guess summarize maybe and move on from there. I'm not going to go through the full draft. It's 35 rounds. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know I am pretty heavily involved in every aspect that I can. When it comes to this game, I like to control every bit of it. So even though I use full scouting, and I utilize the ratings that my scout gives these players in terms of potential and how they're rated overall at the moment, I still make the final decision when it comes to who I draft. So I'm not going to burden you with 35 rounds of that, but I want to go through the first few rounds and just show you how I come to deliberate and choose the guys that I pick. So now that it's my pick, I'm going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the pool into pitchers and batters. So I want to look at all pitchers first, and then I want to look at their potential, not their actual ratings, and I'm just going to filter it so that it's basically highest potential to the lowest. And another key thing, this is how I use the scouting system and the ratings. You can do whatever. Just know that the concepts are the same if you're not using what I do, which for me, potential and overall is the 5-star rating system. I just think it's a quick, easy visual to give you an idea of how good a player can be. But for the individual ratings, stuff, movement, control for pitchers, contact power, I think it is for batters, I use the 20-80 scale. So a guy at 80 is maxed. I don't go over 80. So this guy, Mike Earl, who's a left-handed closer, I mean, this guy's really got about the highest potential you can get. 5-star overall, stuff potential 80, good movement too. So when you have stuff and movement that are going to potentially be on the high side, which is above average, that's usually a good sign. And what I'm looking for with pitchers is I just go down this line. I go stuff, then movement, then control. Stuff's going to give you strikeouts. Movement's going to keep you from giving up a lot of extra base hits, a lot of home runs for sure. Control, of course, is going to limit the walks. And when it comes to pitchers, I'm looking at starting pitchers ahead of relief pitchers. But I tell you, sometimes I will look at a guy like Mike Earl, and if he looks like a sure bet, looks like he's going to be the best reliever ever, I sometimes draft these guys first round, and I have developed at least one Hall of Fame reliever that way. When I drafted him in the first round, he was ready for the majors in within a year or two, and just had a great career. And I've got another guy who I think is on the bubble for the Hall of Fame. Same way, he was a 6-time reliever of the year. I drafted him in the first round because he just was amazing, both in his potential and the way he came out of college or the minors, or the high school, whichever it was, with an overall rating. But here's the thing I look at with relievers. Unless they're a sure bet, I want my relievers to have at least 3 pitches. And even closers can get away with 2, but they need to really have a high potential, and in this case, matched out potential, which this guy kind of does. His control bothers me a little bit, but one of the things that I would hesitate from drafting him first, another thing with relievers, if they're really that true sure bet type relievers out of college or high school, they're usually going to come out with 1 star or better, sometimes 2 stars when it comes to overall. My scout's going to say, hey, they're ready for probably high to mid minors already. So this guy, he's still, as good as his potential is, he's still going to have a lot of development time. He's not going to be there right off the bat. And so I'm going to probably pass on this guy, but he is, in terms of potential, the best pitcher available. But for me, I'm looking at starters first. I mean, I'm looking for a guy who's going to be able to develop, make it into that starting rotation, hopefully a 1, 2, or 3 spot in the rotation. And first pitcher who really kind of covers all of my bases when it comes to the type of pitcher I'm looking at is Nigel Campbell. He's a lefty with good stuff, movement, and decent control potential. But even more importantly for me, with a starting pitcher, he needs to have 3 or more pitches that he's going to be rated at above average or greater. And so this guy would fit that bill. He has a curveball that's below average, but could possibly develop enough that it's a pitch that he's going to use. Another key thing to look at with pitchers is their stamina. You don't want to draft a starting pitcher whose stamina is below 50. If it's below average, odds are the guy's going to max out somewhere in the minors. He'll be turned into a bullpen guy eventually if he can't get his stamina up above average. So this guy looks pretty good from my scout as a pitcher, and then the next guy down, Pat Cowdery, another guy who's a little bit on the bubble, but 3.5-star potential. Great stuff, better stuff than the other guy, but his control is iffy. He does have 3 strong pitches, however, and a good potential stamina. So these 2 pitchers would be, of what I'm seeing here, these would be the 2 guys I go with first. And then maybe this Borsos, he's another one. He's got better stamina than the other 2. Has a potential for 3 ratings here, stuff, movement, and control. That'll be right at average or better. He's got 4 pitches, though, that could be above average. So that's a pretty good, I don't know, that's a pretty good mix there. I like this guy, too, down here. He's got a 70 potential control, above average stuff, movement, and he's got 4 pitches, 3 of them potentially that could be above average, but a low stamina. And the stamina is something that generally does not develop. I rarely see a guy come out of the draft with a low stamina and develop a higher stamina over time. You will see, though, sometimes guys with high stamina or stamina that's just on the border, sometimes they will lose it, and you'll see them late in their career or late in their minor league career. They've converted over to the bullpen because they don't have that stamina for being a starting pitcher anymore. So to me, you don't want to overlook stamina. But of all of the pitchers I'm seeing, it would be between Nigel Campbell and Cowdery if I were to choose one of these guys first. Now, here's the other thing that I like to do. Even though I've got a pretty decent scout, I trust his ratings for the most part. I trust it more than the AI, but I still always check what the OSA or AI ratings are gonna tell me about these players before I draft them. And why I do that is because if you see a discrepancy between your scout and OSA, either way, where OSA has them high, your scout has them low, or your scout has them with a high potential, OSA has them low, excuse me, you want to run from those players. You don't want to make those guys your first pick. Even if you've got, what you would consider the best scout in the league, if there's a big gap between them, I wouldn't waste my first round picks on it, because one of the 2 of them is going to be right, but it's rare, they can't both be right in that instance, and it's just a gamble as to who's going to be right if there's a big gap. So you don't want to, if this guy, for instance, my scout has him at 3.5, and let's say OSA had him as like 2-star potential pitcher who might make the majors. Scouts here, OSA says that he's probably going to be one of the most among the best starting pitchers in baseball right now in any organization. Same for my scout. So that's a pretty solid bet. Looking at Campbell, OSA, same deal. They've got him at a 4.5-star potential. Some of his numbers look better from them than my scout. Both of them say front of the rotation from Campbell. OSA says he's probably going to be, or my scout says he's probably going to top out mid-rotation. So really, my scout would tell me to go with Cowdery, even though Cowdery doesn't have 4 pitches and he's got a lower control rating. And that stuff, though, at 80, a starting pitcher with that kind of stuff and stamina is going to be hard to get. So that's how I would look at the pitchers and what I'd use to deliberate. I also like to go through the complete list and filter just from OSA's ratings. And you'll see they've got Boozer, who we've already been looking at, and Cowdery. both my scout and OSA think those are the two best starting pitchers in the draft right now. But no, I think Boozer. Yeah, see, here's where you get the discrepancies, and this is what I'm talking about. OSA has this guy ranked where he's going to be an ace. That's about as high as you're going to see a lot of times for a starting pitcher. But my scout has him at a 2.5 star potential with a ceiling as being a 5th starter. So that's where the discrepancies become too much for me. So even though OSA likes this guy a lot, they think he's the best pitcher in the draft, I wouldn't go with him because of that discrepancy. Here's Eric Stone, another one. OSA thinks this guy's going to be a 4-star pitcher, and he's got 4 really solid pitchers, good stamina. I do like what I'm seeing there. 3 and a 4-star potential, that's good. He has front of the rotation potential from OSA. My scout, he's a 3-star, poor control, midland to maybe a little bit above average stuff and movement. And he says he might make it to number 3 starter. Back to OSA, another guy here, John Felt. They think he's got potential to be a 4-star pitcher. He does have the stamina. He's got 3 solid pitches. My scout thinks he's a 3-star with poor movement, and think that he's probably going to be better suited for the bullpen. But I'll see what the scout actually says. He has he's got the chance to be a number 2 starter, and OSA has him at front of the rotation. So a lot of times it'll come down to gut instinct, but like I say, I'm looking at this, trusting my scout, comparing it to OSA. I'm going to go for either Campbell or Cowdery if I'm going to pick a pitcher in this first round. But I haven't looked at the batters yet. So let's go ahead and switch over, change position to all batters, and then start out with the potential, highest potential on down. And so, like I said before, I'm going to be looking for contact primarily. So we got 2 guys here, both shortstops. Davenport, Kieser, one's from high school, one's from college. Davenport, there's some good things to like about him. He's got a good personality, which I didn't talk about personality either, but that's something that's key. I'll mention that here in a little bit. I like that he's rated in several different positions, and it looks like he's going to be good at several infield positions because he's got good defensive ratings there. Great power and eye and discipline. So this guy's going to have some good power, probably a low average. His contact's just, for my scout anyway, is picked to get top out. 45 on my scale is below average. I'm looking at 55 and up usually. So he's going to be below average in terms of batting average. He's going to strike out quite a bit, but he's going to give you power and decent defense. Not a lot of speed. If I look at the scouting, he thinks he's going to be good, but I'm not seeing this sure bet type of thing where he's going to be like an elite shortstop or he's going to be a future all-star at shortstop. It's kind of vague what my scout's telling me. That he has the potential to unleash his obvious talent, it's not really giving me what I'm looking for in a first-round pick. But now, if I look at OSA, they've got him at 4.5. They like his contact a little bit better. They think he's going to be a better all-around player than my scout. He has good potential and a very promising future, just a little bit better, a better rating there from OSA. But this next guy, there are a few things about him that I like better. I like his contact better. He's got good gap power. His home run power is low, but it could develop. It honestly could develop if he's got good contact and gap power. He's got good speed. His defense is better than the previous guy. And his personality is not negative. It's not overly positive, but it's not negative. He's also coming from a college program where he's seen a great competition level, so he's probably going to fit into the minors pretty early and develop pretty quick. He's got the same scouting report for the most part as the guy ahead of him, except that he's got better speed. So that's how my scout looks at him. OSA, they're not as high on him. But, it's, to me, the discrepancy, though, is not that big because OSA still likes everything individually about this guy. They think he's going to have a high contact and gap and avoiding Ks. They think he's going to have good speed and defense. So it wouldn't be that big of a gap. I mean, he's either a 3.5 or 3-star potential, not that big a deal. Davenport, though, you got 3.5 or 4.5. I think that's a pretty big gap. And then if I look down the line, this guy in right field, he's a good overall contact and power type player. Good defense out of the draft at 2 positions. OSA has him at 4 stars, so he would be a pretty good pick. I don't necessarily like him because of his speed. I think I've already mentioned, I'll go over it again, but I look at contact, speed, then power in terms of my draft strategy, what I'm looking for in batters. I still think that power is going to develop, but, a good contact hitter with, some other attributes that are good, especially speed, can develop power, but it's very rare in this game anyway that you see a power guy all of a sudden start hitting 300 when he's never really done that in his minor or amateur career. It's really tough to develop the opposite. And so that's why I go with contact first. But I really think those 2 guys would be a good choice. This is a pretty decent catcher. I don't like his lack of power. I kind of like a little bit more power from a catcher. OSA, it's toss-up. He's a 3-star potential from my scout and OSA. But I want to do the same thing. I want to look at how OSA scouts these guys. They've got Davenport as the best overall offensive player. They've got another shortstop here, Marzano. And this guy's won a lot of money, $7 million. My head scouts only got him as a 3-star player, but he does have one of the things I also like looking at is he's got above average potential in every individual rating. And that's really, it's not a sure bet. Again, they have to develop to that, but that's something that's the kind of player I ultimately like to develop as an all-around player that's going to be average, really above average, even just a tick above average in all 5 categories offensively when it comes to batting. He's got good speed as well. But the thing that I have to deliberate now is looking at the offensive guys who are the batters that are available. Are they really better and going to have a better impact than the top pitchers? This is an opinion thing. It's subjective, I know, but again, my experience is unless it's a batter who's just almost a sure bet from your scout and OSA. I mean, yeah, these guys look like they're going to make it. Again, they have good potential. They don't have any negatives to their personality. Looks like, they both these guys have a good shot at it. But they're not the kind of impact players as one of these starting pitchers would be, either Campbell or Cowdery, who have the chance to be number 1 starters on your team. So for me, with this first pick, it's going to be one of these 2 pitchers. Now the question is, what's going to help me narrow it down? So if I'm just glancing at it, this line here, Campbell, for instance, he's more of a ground ball pitcher. He's a lefty, which sometimes has a lot of value. If you have a lefty starter who's dominant, sometimes they have more value in the league than a righty. He's got higher velocity and better stamina. And scout accuracy, for what it's worth, my scout has a better look at this guy than he does Cowdery. So, of the two, I like Cowdery's potential, or excuse me, Campbell's potential a little bit better. And then it kind of comes down, if they're really evenly matched, it's going to come down to a lot of other things. So let's take a look at some of those other things. One would be the personality. If it's negative, where, hey, he's got a poor work ethic, or he doesn't get along well with others, he's selfish, those kind of things, then that would strike him off the list. But here, it's not the one that you primarily look for. Things like he doesn't just listen, he takes notes. He's got, he puts in extra drills or extra practice time. He's the first one shows up to camp in the morning, to practice in the morning. Those are some of the positive personality ratings you might see. But it's certainly not a negative. I mean, it's basically telling us that this guy is pretty smart, for what it's worth. And the kind of guy who's probably going to be successful whatever he decides to do. So that's not a bad thing. He's got a great fastball already. Slider's already close to being there, but he's got some development room to go with his curveball and changeup. So that gives me a little bit of a hesitancy. And then OSA, he's 4.5 stars. He's even better with OSA than the way my scout looks. His bonus demand is $6 million. So those are pretty much everything I need to look at with this guy. Now with Cowdery, his pitches individually are already there for the minor league level. He's at average with his cutter, just a tick below average with his curveball and changeup. Stamina, holding runners, he's pretty good, especially for a right-handed pitcher. He's got a better... Well, his stuff is going to be pretty much similar to the previous pitcher. His personality, though, is rated higher, in my opinion. That's a little bit better value than somebody who's just says he's smart. This guy, he's going to give a good, honest effort. That means he's going to work hard to get better, I think. And then bonus demand is $6 million, so they're both going for $6 million. OSA has this guy at a 5-star. But with lower stamina. I feel like these guys are so even that final word, maybe in this case, it might be OSA. Because one of the things that you also can consider when you're drafting is the way OSA sees this pitcher is a lot of times the way the other teams in the league are going to see him. So he's going to be valued as a higher prospect by not just OSA and the AI, but by other teams in the league. So when it comes to trade bait, for instance, this guy would probably have more value than Nigel Campbell. So a lot of deliberations to look at there, but I think I'm going to make Cowdery my choice, even though that's typically a lot more money than I like to throw out there, and it's going to eat into my budget. But I think looking at where we are in the draft, we need to have a really good high-impact player here. So I'm going to go ahead, draft him. I don't offer the slot. I know right now it says the slot's really lower than what this guy is demanding, but I'm going to take a gamble and hope that I can get him for the slot anyway, and we'll just have to go from there. But that's my first pick done. So now that's going to change things a lot. So you're going to see the Nigel guy is already gone. This guy's still around. He's still a good prospect from both my scout and OSA. But I'm not seeing any above average starting pitch. Well, just one above average starting pitching prospect here. So I'm going to move over to batters and try to take a batter in my second pick. I don't see any above average prospects here, but I do like this Kevin Kraft guy. He's one of those guys who, again, he's got the potential to be above average in every batting rating, and that's something that's really good to have. And if they've got good work ethic and things like that, and they develop, that usually translates in a solid player over the length of his career. The only thing that bothers me, and this is something I want to mention too, and when I was thinking about putting this together, this is one of the key things I want to talk about batters. The way the game, if there's any negative I've seen with this game when it comes to development of your draft picks and your minor league players, the way it handles lefty batters is a little bit skewed right now. I hope it's something maybe that they address and tweak a little bit in a future patch or future version, I guess, at this point. But a left-handed batter usually tops out in terms of their ratings only against right-handed pitchers. So they're usually not rated equally on both sides of the plate. And that gives them still, if you think about, the numbers, most pitchers in the major leagues are going to be right-handed pitchers for the most part. They're going to see righties more than they are lefties, although, that's still not, I don't think, a big enough consideration to why this should develop the way it does. But what you'll have happen a lot of times is you wind up having a guy who's so skewed ratings-wise against lefties that you have to platoon him. And so I wouldn't want to waste a high draft pick against a guy who potentially could have that happen to him. So if I'm going to draft a lefty, I want somebody who's going to be rated with good potential from both sides of the plate, and it's rare. You don't see it a whole lot in this game. So I would probably look for another right-handed bat before I would go with this guy. So I'm not seeing too much here in terms of overall potential. So as I've said earlier, contact is pretty much what I'm going for. So I'm going to filter this by contact hitters and look for one of the better contact hitters available here. And I tell you one that's sticking out right now is this Jaden Hutcherson. His power is going to be low. His speed might develop a little bit over time. He's going to be a pretty good defender. Looks like he's got a good work ethic, and he is rated pretty well with OSA and My Scout. So he's somebody that I would consider. Here's I don't like his eye combined with that low power, and he's another lefty. And if you look, same deal. He's probably going to bat better against righties. I don't want to take a gamble on that right now. But I'm not really seeing a whole lot of guys here that are blowing me away. Although now here's a guy, and I have a weakness for second baseman. I love that position. Here's a guy who's, from My Scout anyway, he's got above average contact potential, just a tick below average in home run power. He's a good defensive second baseman, pretty positive personality rating, good speed. And he doesn't hit as well against righties, but that doesn't bother me as much for switch hitters or righty batters, but he's a possibility. It's unfortunate, though. It looks like second round now, we're into this, and there's not a whole lot of players left. Now, here's a good-looking center fielder, though, that I really like a couple things about him. He is a righty bat, so the ratings, you're not going to see a difference too much, and there you go, exactly what I'm talking about. He's rated the same from both sides of the plate, so that he's probably going to develop. OSA doesn't think so, but it's still close enough. He's probably going to develop equally well, I think, against right-handed and left-handed pitching. He's got about the best speed you can get. and he's got the potential to be average or better in every batting rating category. OSA thinks he's even better. So to me, he's not a sure bet. My scout thinks he's going to be below average, but I don't know. I think those potentials are really good. I think this is the guy I want to pick. He fits the style of play I like. He's got potential to be an above average, in my opinion, everyday player. And more importantly, probably now, because I spent so much on that first pick, his bonus demand is really low. And so that's something I'm going to have to take into consideration now too. So we're two picks down. My guess is now we're probably going to start seeing that Kevin Kraft is still out there. Probably the best offensive potential of any player in the draft left. But I think, again, maybe the AI is picking up on this as well. He's going to more than likely just be, it's going to be a platoon situation for him. He's probably going to have to sit against left-handed pitchers if he can't develop that a little bit better. So let's go back to pitching, because I'm not really seeing too much there from offense from the batter side. And I bet we've got some good pitchers left, and primarily this Jean Veet, if you say it that way. This guy looked great in high school. He has good personality ratings. Bonus demand's not that high. I like his makeup for sure. I think he's going to have the potential. Both OSA and my scout think he's going to be a solid starting pitcher. My scout thinks he's going to be number 2 potentially, and OSA thinks he's going to be front of the rotation. So he's obviously going to be a good pick here, I think. So now on the 4th pick, and it's looking already like this is going to be kind of a pitcher-heavy draft, at least in the early rounds, because I'm not seeing any offensive players here who are standing out like they're going to be sure bets or perennial all-stars. And even OSA at this point, they've got a few guys that they think have the potential to be average or better, but nothing really crazy. So sticking with, where I'm at financially and everything else, I think, I'm at a point in my minors where pitching is kind of taking a dive. That's one of the ways that I won those 3 World Series is I got some great great drafts for some pitching prospects that matured and turned into the prospects they should have been. I'm a little bit on the downswing now when it comes to that. So pitching could be something that I need more than batting in the minors. So this high in the draft, I'm not opposed to taking a reliever, because as you see, you've got a couple guys here who my scout and OSA think are going to be above average type relievers. So let me take a look at these two at the top here. Joey Swartz, stuff, movement, control, all predicted to be at average or better. He's got 3 pitches that are probably going to be average or better if he develops right, with the slider being above average, pretty comfortably above average. But he doesn't have a great personality rating. Focus can be a problem, so I'm not sure how well he's going to develop. He does have good, really better potential based on OSA's ratings for him. So the other guy, Pat Toole, another one with, his personality ratings, it's about a wash between the two of them. But already the thing that I don't like about this guy, he only has 2 pitches. And one's going to be well above average. The other one, curveball, might just settle into a tick above average. So he's not going to be a dominant type pitcher for the most part. His stuff has the potential to be that way. And if you look at what OSA says for him, they don't think his movement is going to be above average or even average, really. That would be, in my view, anything below 50 is below average if you want somebody who's going to be good, or if you're looking for a rating that they're going to be good in. So between these two, it's pretty obviously Schwartz for me. I think he has the better upside and the better ratings. So one more pick, and then we'll call it a day. I do like this other guy here. OSA had a 3-star pitcher, Mike Flores. But one of the things I stay away like the plague, which I guess is kind of apt way to say it, but movement, if they can have the greatest stuff, greatest control. If one of those ratings is that low, it's never going to develop. It's just my experience. It's too low at the start to ever develop into average or, close to average territory. So regardless of what the rating is, and it's true more of pitchers than batters, because when you think about it, pitchers only have these 3 ratings to really kind of give a good snapshot of what kind of pitcher they're going to be or how good they're going to be. A batter, you've got 5, so if they don't have power, but they've got speed and contact, they're going to be valuable. But a pitcher who's got stuff and control but terrible movement, he's not going to have any value, because he's going to give up way too many home runs in this case to be valuable for you. And then if he's got good stuff and movement but terrible control, he's going to walk too many. And, you kind of get where I'm saying that. So definitely stay away from that one. So it looks like I think we've exhausted the pitching for the first 5 rounds anyway. I'm not going to take a gamble on this Toole now. So we'll go back to batters. And for me, I'm just going to look at the better contact hitters and go from there. And that's how I will probably draft until I get to a place where the contact potential is no longer above average. And then I'll look at speed. I'll just filter it by speed, and I'll take the best players in the draft in terms of their speed relative to the rest. I'm not going to take somebody who's got awesome speed but is, bottom in every other category. But then after speed, I might take a look at power and see if there are any potential power hitters still left, guys with above average rated power. And I'm back and forth that way for the rest of the draft until I get through the full 35 rounds. My experience again is the most valuable picks are going to be the first 5. After that, it's really a crapshoot, and it's really hit or miss. And a lot of times it comes down to your gut instinct and your experience level with the game. You might just see something with the guy's ratings that triggers how maybe you've drafted a guy with these similar ratings before, and they've turned out to be well or have a good career, be a decent bench player, if nothing else. But after you get past the first 10 rounds, then it comes up to being about a lot of times those subjective ratings. Do they have the good personality ratings? Do they have something like this guy, good communicator and consensus seeker? He's going to be a good team player. Or let me see if I can find one like this guy for avoid him, bright and vocal. He can learn to be more positive. He's not going to be a good team influence. He's probably not going to develop the way he should. Let's see. I mean, there's several negatives that I'm seeing. Keeps up with his routines. I mean, that's kind of a wash. I mean, that's one of those average ones. I mean, this is a negative. He's slow to absorb instruction from his coaches. He's probably not going to develop. This guy has a lack of game savvy. He's probably not going to develop. I'm seeing a lot of negatives here in some of these personality ratings, but that's where the subjectivity comes into. And I didn't want to get too deep into that. I just wanted to give you a kind of a guide of how I pick my first few players in the draft, what I'm looking for both in batters and pitchers, and how I kind of compare the two, and what are the criteria I use to make my top picks. Hopefully you'll get some value out of this, and you can let me know if you have your own pointers or tips in the comments. But I really like pointing out as much as I can about this game. I think there's a lot that you'd be surprised how many small, fine aspects of this game can make a difference. And drafting is definitely one of those things where a small observation, I think, can lead to something big. But hopefully you'll see some value out of these. I know I'm getting kind of long on the video, so I'll cut it out here. But if there's any other kind of videos you'd like to see in this series along the same general concept or outline, let me know. I'd be interested in getting your feedback. And as always, I appreciate the support, your likes, your comments, and watching the videos. And I will see you next episode.